Hey, Adam,
Geez,
one
why,
thing.
why do you think they called bumpers scary?
I don't know.
Because they come at the beginning, at the end, like bumpers.
Alex, you're a marketing guy. Do you like that design behind Paul? Does that SWOT logo thing look pretty cool to you?
Hey, I forgot to hit the record button.
Yeah, that's really professional, isn't it?
Well, this is a professional podcast.
I met her in a parking lot and was handed 2 little Yorkies. And the only person I knew that knew Yorkies was Paul. So I called Paul and said, Paul.
Sweet Talk is a weekly 20-minute podcast brought to you by the Continuing Education and Workforce Training Division of Idaho State University's College of Technology. Find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and SoundCloud and subscribe today. Now it's time to get started with Sweet Talk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sweet Talk, a weekly podcast here at Idaho State University's Continuing Education and Workforce Training. I am one of your co-hosts, Paul Dickey, the Video Instruction Manager and Apprenticeship Coordinator here at Sweet. And as always, joining us is our Marketing Director, Angie Wilhelm. Angie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I just looked out my window and it's bright and sunny. I'm very happy that we live in, I think, one of the sunniest cities in the U.S.
Really?
So I believe we do. I believe Pocatello is one of the sunniest cities in the U.S. We have.
I mean, when I moved here from Massachusetts, I noticed that they had more sunshine than Massachusetts does, but sunniest, I don't know.
Probably overall, but maybe not warm sun all the time.
Yeah, I
Right?
believe they rate on how many days of sun each city has. And that's what's really nice is in the winter time when it gets cold, oftentimes here we still have sun, and I'll try to find some of those statistics for you. But joining us today as well is Raylyn Price, the Interim Director of Continuing Education and Workforce Training here at Idaho State University. Welcome, as always, Raylyn. How are you today?
Thank you, Angie. I'm very pleased to be able to be on this podcast today. It not only is a beautiful day, but we have an extraordinary guest with us today. We have Jon Politis, who's coming as our keynote speaker to our emergency medicine conference, which just in 2 weeks, February 8th through the 10th. And so excited to have him on here. Jon is a Jenny Lake Ranger for the Grand Teton National Park. And he is also has a consulting business for EMS training. And so we came in touch with him through Darren Jernigan, who is also in our department, who also worked with Jon during the summers in the Grand Teton National Park. And he brought us together because Jon is an amazing presenter. So we've had the pleasure of having Jon at some of our emergency medicine conferences. And can I just tell a real quick story, Jon?
Sure.
Hope
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't
absolutely.
embarrass you, but
No, not at all.
a couple of years ago, we had a speaker who very, very last minute, like half hour before the beginning keynote, was not able to come. He had some health concerns. And I was distraught because I was leading this conference, putting this conference together, and I had no keynote speaker. And Jon, bless his heart, came up to me at the conference and he said, "Is there anything I can do to help?" And kind of out of the corner of my mouth said, "Well, I need a keynote speaker." And he's like, "Well, I can do that for you." And I said, "Well, are you sure? I hate to put you on the spot like that." And he's like, "No, what do you want to talk about? Or what do you want me to talk about?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. What are you prepared to talk about?" He's like, "Oh, Raylyn," he says, "I have 200 presentations right here that just at my disposal." And I thought, wow, that is amazing. So he went, he says, "Give me 10 minutes. He comes back and he's like, "Here's my topic." And I'm like, perfect. And I'll tell you what, he is a master. And that's what we learned about Jon is even our MC, he's like, wow. He says, "This guy is amazing." And I said, "You're absolutely right." Love Jon. So anyway, I'll turn the time over to Jon to give his introduction, but happy to have you on.
Oh, thanks, Raylyn. I really appreciate it.
Can you
Okay,
tell
good.
us a little bit about your journey into EMS and how that started for you?
Well, that's a great question. I grew up, my dad in upstate New York. My dad was a volunteer firefighter, and he worked in a paper mill and fought World War II. And when he got home, he and his buddies started a volunteer fire department. And as a little kid, I pedaled my bike down to the firehouse every Thursday night to watch my dad and his friends do drills, and I was just completely smitten with fire trucks at a young age. And I when I got to be I had a paper route and I was 14, and my dad said, "Well, it's time for you to start kicking in some money towards your lift tickets when we go skiing." And I'm like, "I want to do that. That's what you're supposed to do. You're dad, you know." So I figured out the guys in the ski patrol got to ski for free and cut the lift line. And so I took first aid training, and there was a whole chain of events. I was just exposed to some incredible mentors on ski patrol, and I was always just completely, engaged when they were talking about things during training. And I was getting to be a senior in high school, and there was a new thing starting up called EMT. And that was, I learned about it in the fall of 1970. And one of the first EMT classes in New York State was in the area that I lived in. And started in 1970, right in December, and then finished up in March of 1971. And I took my ski patrol mentors got me into that class, um, and it was fascinating. And I graduated from high school and started college, and used my new EMT training to go to work for an ambulance company, which there was no 911 then, and fire departments usually didn't do EMS. And a private ambulance company I worked for had a contract to run emergency calls in Albany, New York, and it was an eye-opening experience. And the people I worked with could see that I was just smitten by everything I was learning and the things I was seeing, but they all said, "Kid, there's no future in this. Finish your college degree, go out and go be a school teacher." I was planning to be a phys ed teacher, and maybe you could do this in the summers or something, but there's no future in it. So um, I started the fall semester of college in 1971, and then um, by January of 1972, there was a TV pilot that was on. It was a pilot show for the emergency. And I know that sounds really corny, but I remember myself and millions of others watched that show, and I was so interested in this stuff. And I thought to myself, I don't know where that's happening, but I want to do that. That's what I want to be. So I did finish college. I worked through college as a EMT, and also I transferred to college in Vermont, where I worked also as a part-time firefighter, and graduated from college. And my first job was being a full-time firefighter in Burlington, Vermont. And I left that to off to do EMS training for the Vermont EMS office, and I was one of the two state EMS training coordinators. Vermont being a small state, it was pretty hands-on as a training coordinator. It was the days when we were setting up initial EMT training where it didn't exist, and I guess you could call it EMS missionary work of the day. And there were federal grants that were in place to help advance EMS, and so I continued to work part-time as a firefighter, and I worked, full-time for the Vermont EMS program as a training coordinator. And by the late 70s, I accepted a position to run the paramedic program in Albany, New York. And so I moved back to the area that I'm from, in the Albany area, and stayed involved in EMS. And I joined a volunteer fire department, and my background is the apparatus from my volunteer department, which um, if you're not familiar with the East Coast volunteer fire departments, we're generally very well funded and very professional. And if you were to drive by the station, you would not intuit that we're a volunteer fire department, but we're quite busy. We do about 700 runs a year, and um, that's not EMS runs. That's 700 fire call runs. And so I ran the paramedic program, and then went to work in the state EMS office, and I was assistant director of EMS for New York State. And I was in charge of all the training for the state of New York for EMS. And I've been in the same volunteer fire department now for a really long time, and I've held every position up to and including the rank of chief. because we're short on officers. I'm recycling as a captain at this point. I'm the first captain of the department, um, and I continue to. I left the state health department to go to work in the town that I live in, which is Colony, New York, and Colony is a suburban town of about 100,000 people, and they hired me as their first EMS chief. So I was the chief of the Colony EMS department, and in Colony EMS, it's fairly busy. There's about 14,000 runs a year, and there's a very diverse EMS organization being involved in rescue as well as EMS. And as a parallel thing to all of this, I've always had a keen interest in the outdoors, and I've always been a climber. And in the early 90s, my wife asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I said, well, I want to go on a climbing trip to the Tetons with my buddies. And she said, okay, well, all right, get this out of your system. So, to make a long story short, I started going to the Tetons, and one thing led to another, and I've made some lifelong friends, one of them being my good friend, Darren Jernigan. And while I do work at Jenny Lake, and I'm called a Jenny Lake Ranger, my job is that of a paramedic. And guys like Darren are the real deal. He's one of the climbing rangers, and I have utmost respect for the rangers that I work with. But as a paramedic ranger, I get to be involved in pretty much all of the rescues. I get to go climbing and doing everything else that a ranger does. But I certainly wouldn't want anybody to think that I'm one of the what I call thoroughbred horses. Guys like Darren, I could tell you stories about his physical feats. I know he's had some health issues in the last 2 years, but the people I work with are incredibly fit, incredibly skilled, and I'm in awe of the people that I work with. Darren being one of them. I actually, this gave me a plaque for 25 years of service as a
Wow.
Jenny Lake Ranger. So
Getting it out of your system, like your wife thought she was doing, it just kind of fuels your passion.
it really did, yeah.
And now she
Uh,
goes with you, right? For the
She
summer?
does, yeah, she does. She's retired and goes with me. Even though I've been involved for 25 years, I have not been involved with the entire summer for 25 years. I would usually spend almost a month of my vacation time going there to work, volunteering my time and helping with the EMS training. And in the last 10 years or so, I have a regular seasonal job, and I spend pretty much the entire summer there. My season starts around the 1st of May and ends up at the end of September. And having climbing skills and being fit and being a paramedic and being a good teacher has taken me to a lot of places. I've done 2 tours on Denali. I went to go climb Denali in 21 as a Park Service Patrol, Mountaineering Patrol, and I went back this past season to be the base camp medical officer, and I'm going back again this season to do the same
Wow.
thing. I've had this incredible experience there, and I would say that the people that I've had a chance to work with, the work that we do, is I kind of consider it to be a pinnacle of my career, where I get to work in an amazing place with the finest people I've ever worked with, doing amazing things that most people could only dream of, and it's all because of the nature of that organization. And I know we also have Scott Gunther coming as part of the faculty for the conference this year, who is an amazing leader, by the way, and was our boss there for many years, just retired. The organization is just a magnet for really good people, and I've just been lucky enough to be part of it. And so anyway, that's
Well, I
I'm
appreciate
sure you have
that.
sure you have a real question to come up here, but that's enough about
Well,
me. So
Well, John, it sounds like you've been doing paramedic EMT work for almost over 50 years.
it is. On March 20th of 2021, I celebrated my 50th anniversary. And I've always been clinically active. I've always been involved as a firefighter, and I have my fire service pedigree is not quite as good as my EMS pedigree, but I've been involved as a part-time call firefighter, full-time firefighter, and now volunteer firefighter for over 40 years and in a very busy department. And so that's also one of the things that's helpful in my job in the Tetons, that I bring a lot of street experience to both the fire side of it with structural fire, as well as to the EMS part of it. And that's that's, I guess, that's been one of the things that I've been able to contribute, is that I have a lot of experience in doing street medicine. In fact, I still work part-time as a paramedic. I worked a shift yesterday
Oh, wow.
for Albany County, and I didn't get home till late, and I was really tired. And we had a fire call this morning at 8 o'clock, and I wasn't out of bed yet. So I'm like, no, I'm not going on that one. It was automatic fire alarm activation. I think I can pass that one up. So.
So that leads to an interesting question, John. I mean, so since you're doing street EMT firefighting, but you're also doing the wilderness at the Tetons, what was the biggest transition or things you had to learn from your regular street practicing of those skills to the wilderness?
Well, I think that's a terrific question. I think one of the things is going from ideal to real. You know, in the street environment, we go to somebody and we have a short distance that we travel from the apparatus to the patient, and the considerations of your fitness and what you're bringing with you. And there's a lot of things that might be ideal to do, but when you go to the wilderness environment, they might be ideal, but they actually might really compromise things, because you could put yourself in a situation where you're trying to carry heavy equipment, which is electrically powered, and trying to do that in a backcountry environment. And in doing so, you can't really sustain it. So I think in the wilderness environment, the wilderness is a great magnifier of little mistakes. And, you know, for example, in the street environment, we generally avoid walking people because they may be unsteady on their feet and they're more likely to fall. But the evacuation is pretty simple. We can put them on a wheeled stretcher and move them to where we need to, and we don't have to risk a fall. You know, in the backcountry environment, we may have somebody with a shoulder dislocation or broken extremity, arm in particular. In the street environment, we would probably provide some analgesia or sedation for that person, and then put them on a stretcher, move them to the ambulance, and get them to definitive care. But you know, in the wilderness environment, even though I might have the right drugs to give, if I give somebody an analgesic such as morphine or fentanyl or Dilaudid, or use a drug like ketamine maybe to help reduce a shoulder, that will make the person unsteady on their feet to the point where it would be dangerous and to walk them. And sometimes the fastest way, which involves the least amount of risk to everyone, is for the patient to walk with some assistance. And the other thing is that you know, there's the ideal again, and there's the real. You have when you're traveling in the backcountry, even when you know you're going to an emergency, you're not able to carry a 27.5 pound life pack with you, or you're not able to carry a drug kit, which weighs almost the same amount. So you have to really recalibrate and really rethink everything, and bring it down to the absolute minimum that you're going to need to actually treat the patient and safely get them evacuated. And in some mountain ranges, such as the Tetons, evacuation is dangerous for everyone, even when you're doing it with a litter. It means people can easily get hurt, breaking extremities themselves, and of course, there's always a risk of using a helicopter of a aviation accident. So usually allowing a person to walk out under their own power, if we can do that, it's the safest option for everyone. The patient as well, I might add. It may seem rather cruel at times, but you know, one of the things that we kind of joke about is that we'll have somebody who's limping down a trail, and the moment that a rescuer comes along and says, "Oh, how are you? Can I help you?" People automatically go, "Oh my God, help is here. I don't have to do this anymore." And they stop. So you have to do a careful size up. And if somebody's walking under their own power, you know, that might mean, "Good on you, great job. How are you doing?" You know, and just keep encouraging them on, because that will get them down faster and safer than us then having to push a wheel litter up a couple of 1,000 feet and get them in it and then get them out of the backcountry with that wheel loader. And Darren or Scott would tell you that everyone has the oohs and ahs of people hanging underneath the helicopter because that's the dramatic stuff. But the reality is the real work of search and rescue, Idaho, Wyoming, doesn't matter, or in the East, is putting somebody in a litter and moving them out of where they are. And it's the backbreaking work that is really the bread and butter of all search and rescue in the country.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Wow. So can you think of maybe one of your top experiences that just really stand out to you in EMS or as a ranger, that kind of an unforgettable, that made an impact on you in a positive way, I guess?
Well, yes. And I was not on the sharp end of this rescue, but one of our very finest rangers, and they're all really incredible, and he's a mountain runner. His name's Noah. And if you were to look at Noah, he looks like a mild-mannered accountant. Looking at him, you would not intuit that he's the complete badass that he is. And he was doing a mountain run. He basically climbed the Grand in a couple hours, which is like, it's like an incredible feat. And he was coming down, and as he was coming down next to the Middle Teton Glacier, there were a couple of mountaineers that were in their 60s that were coming down off the lower saddle after having been completely beaten by the mountain. They were I would say that they probably underestimated the task and maybe their abilities. And they were, instead of taking the trail down, they were sliding down on the glacier, and they made a fateful decision to go down this area of the glacier, which is noted for having a moat, which people can sometimes slide into and die.
Oh, wow.
And you heard hollering that, and anyway, one of these two mountaineers had slid into a moat, and he had cold water running on him. And as it would happen, there were guides from both Jackson Hole Mountain Guides and Exum Mountain Guides, as well as people who were bystanders that were able to be nearby to this guy, and able to throw a rope down to him, able to pull him out of the moat. And then Noah got there about at the same time and helped all of them get this man extricated. And he had a couple of fractures, and he was really scraped up. And the page went out for a rescue, and I responded to the rescue cache. And usually a couple of days a week, I'm assigned to the ambulance, and which means that I'm gone on every search and rescue. It doesn't matter what it is, I'm involved in it. And so I went to the rescue cache and got ready, and it was a helicopter short haul operation. The man was shivering uncontrollably, and Noah was able to start to try and get him warm and able to get him evacuated, and we got him out to the cache, and we further evaluated him, and we got him in the ambulance and en route to St. John's Medical Center. And I continued my assessment and monitoring, and I didn't need to give him anything for pain because he didn't want anything. And he was, I could tell that he was really shaken up by what had just happened, far beyond the actual trauma of the accident. And I got to talking with him, and he was a man from Atlanta, and even though he was from a warm climate, the man had a significant climbing resume. He'd done quite a bit in his life, and he was struggling with the whole notion of, well, maybe I can't do this anymore, or maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. And we were talking about that. We had quite a conversation about it, and I just encouraged him to tell him that, listen, I'm from the East Coast, and when I come to Wyoming, the first 3 weeks that I'm there, I am completely gassed because of the altitude, and it's really hard. And then on top of that, you're doing this the hard way. You're carrying a 50-pound pack at altitude after having just arrived here from sea level. And I tried to help put this in perspective for this guy who was a good guy, and I could see a lot of myself in him, actually, because there's also a story behind how I got involved with the Rangers. It involved me going there for the first couple of times and not knowing what I should know. And I was completely blown away that he wrote me this beautiful letter that he said that the conversation that we had en route in the ambulance to the hospital was so powerful to him, because at the time of the accident, not only was he shaken up, but he thought he was going to have to give up a sport that had given him so much joy in his life. And I've always known that talking to people during moments of crisis can be very powerful, but it isn't often that people circle back to you to tell you what your words or the conversation has meant to them. And since that time, I've always been really attuned to communicating with our patients but I'm even more attuned to it today than I have ever been. And it doesn't matter. It could be that you're the first responder, you first get on the scene and their lives are out of control, that they're scared to death. And that what they need to hear from us is say, listen, I'm John, you're having a really bad day today, but I'm here to help you and it's going to be okay. We're going to get you out of here. We're going to take really good care of you. If you need anything or you don't understand something, talk to me, okay? But it's you and me, you and me. We're going to communicate this whole time. That's really meaningful to people. And the other part of it is that I work as part of a team, and on a team are people who are high-end climbers, mountaineers, alpinists. And then there are mere mortals like me who just happens to be a decent paramedic. I run around in the mountains, and I have a good time and I get to hang around with my heroes. But the reality is that I'm part of a team. My job on the team is not to do what Darren does because I can't do what Darren does, but I can do what I can do. But fortunately, I've been part of a team which recognizes that to have a good team means that everybody brings something to the team and that we all don't have to be the same. What really is important when you're part of a team is the fact that you're there for your team members and you're there to help contribute, and we support each other as part of that team. That's also one of the reasons why it's such a remarkable team, that we do support each other. We all recognize we bring something different to the table. When you put all of that together, it's synergy. It's where the sum of those things is, where the total of it is much more than the sum of the parts. That's the reason why Darren did that job for 20 years. And I've been involved in it for so long, because we recognize that it is something special. And I'm doing it in my talk on teamwork. And part of that discussion is simply that, you have very little ability to control what other people do in your life. However, you do have huge control over yourself. And that to be a good team member, it means that we support each other. We're not critical of each other. We may have difficult conversations about things, but it's communication with each other to become better as a team, not to try and boost our own ego up, because ego is the enemy of teamwork. And in so many places in the world, in organizations, we step on each other to try and get ahead, thinking that somehow we're going to make things better, and we really don't. That the essence of teamwork is your willingness to put your ego aside to help the people on the team succeed and become the best people that they can be. And I would say that the opportunities that I've had in my park, and it goes from our superintendent all the way down to, at every level, it's a remarkable place to work. It's so good. Our youngest daughter, Katie, works there as a ranger too.
Oh, that's awesome.
She doesn't work in the same branch that I do. She doesn't do rescue work, but she got a promotion to another newer job, better job yesterday. So I'm really proud of Katie, and our other two children too, Sarah, who works for the New York State Health Department, and our son Ian, who's a veterinary tech, and
That's awesome.
yeah. Okay.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you
Yeah.
talking about teamwork, because that's what it's all about, right? We don't have to be experts in everything, because
Yeah.
we have experts around us. And when you work together, you do have that synergy, and that's how teams are built and how you accomplish great things. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well,
Appreciate that.
we are out of time. This went by so quickly. Jon is going to be one of the main speakers. He's our keynote speaker at the EMC conference. That will be happening in February. That'll be happening February 9th and 10th. Our pre-conference on the 8th is full. You can find more information about the EMC conference, or the Emergency Medicine Conference, at cetrain.isu.edu/EMC. Can you close us out, Paul?
And
I
thank
s-
you. I just want to say thank you to
Yes, thank
John,
you.
and
Yeah.
I'm
You're
so
welcome, Raylan.
excited to see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, John, thank you so much for being on. Fascinating stories. I mean, I could listen to these stories
I
like these
For a
all
long
day
time.
long.
So come and listen, because he's going to be speaking several times through the conference, and I just can't wait. So
Yeah,
Thanks.
really appreciate your time,
Thanks.
John.
Thank you.
Raylan, thank you so much for being here and introducing us to John. Angie, can't do this without you. And if people would like to check out our offerings for our classes, you can visit our website at cetrain.isu.edu. You can email us at cetrain@isu.edu or give us a call at 208-282-3372. And again, this is our podcast that we use to do community outreach. And if you enjoy this podcast, please like, share, subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it, and be safe out there.